Hello, my name is Mohammed Kimji. In book number 12, the critical situation of the Achaians becomes even more desperate. In book number 11, we know that the Achaians had lost Agamemnon, Diomedes, and Machaon from battle. Each of them was wounded and unable to continue. Book number 12 begins with the poet indicating that the wall that the Achaians had built to protect their ships would fall because the Achaians had angered the gods by not offering enough sacrifices. This is how book number 12 begins. So within the shelter, the warlike son of Menoetius, that's Patroclus, tended stricken Eurypylus, and meanwhile the Argives and Trojans fought on in massed battle. Nor was the Danaans' ditch going to hold them back, nor the wide wall above it they had built for the sake of their ships, and driven a deep ditch about it, and had not given to the gods grand sacrifices, so that it might guard their running ships and their masses of spoil within it. It had been built despite of the immortals' gods, and therefore it was not to stand firm for a long time. You can see just in this very, very simple opening that the poet has no critical standpoint on the poem that he is singing. He indicates that the gods are angry with the Achaians because the Achaians did not offer grand sacrifices, and therefore the wall would fall. But the gods are not unanimous in supporting the Achaians or the Trojans. The gods have different purposes. The gods desire honor for themselves, and each god desires honor for himself or herself at the expense of the other gods. Each god is competing with other gods for honor and power and recognition. And so to say that the gods weren't offered grand sacrifices, it implies that if the gods were offered grand sacrifices, then the Achaians' wall would stand. But we know that there are gods that want the Achaians to be killed. They want the Trojans to be victors in this battle, and they will help the Trojans against the Achaians. So, a very simple point. In the text, it appears that the Achaians are somehow at fault for not offering the gods grand sacrifices, and therefore they will pay with the fall of the Achaean wall. But any serious reader sees that precisely because the gods are opposed to each other, and many of the gods want the Achaeans massacred, sacrifices wouldn't matter, or there's no reason to believe that sacrifices would matter. But the poet doesn't raise any questions about this, and he doesn't point out the strangeness of the claim that he has made in the song that he is singing. And this takes us back to, of course, the very first few lines of the Iliad, where the poet indicates that he is singing a song of the anger of Achilles that has been given to him by the Muse, the daughter of Zeus. And we spoke about the significance of that moment. It seems to be so innocuous, but it's very strange in light of the fact that neither you nor I nor anyone that we know today would begin a work of writing or of song or any work at all by erasing himself or herself from the picture and ascribing the source of this, ascribing the song to a source that is outside of himself or herself. But this is what the poet does. And we spoke about how, in fact, the poet has to do this in order for the song that he sings to have authority. He has to expunge the mortal element from the song that he sings in order for the song to carry the authority of the divine, purely the divine, only the divine. So the source of the poet's authority is the fact that he has none. And we talked a little bit about that when we began working through the Iliad. It's also very interesting to note that Zeus has promised to give honor to Hector. And we know that that will involve fulfilling the wish of Achilles that Thetis, Achilles' mother, carried to Zeus. And that wish of Achilles was that Hector would lead the Trojans all the way to the Achaean ships, slaughtering the Achaians, until Agamemnon recognized his madness that he did no honor to Achilles, the best of the Achaians. So if Zeus is to fulfill that promise, then it has to happen that the Achaean wall will fall. And so again, the poet doesn't raise this issue. Instead, he says, well, for they had failed to offer the gods grand sacrifices. But if Zeus's promise is to be fulfilled, then whether or not the Achaeans offered the sacrifices the gods want, on the assumption that the gods all want the Achaean sacrifices and that it will make a difference to quell their anger, the poet doesn't raise the question of how Zeus's promise could be fulfilled if, in fact, the Achaean wall successfully defended the Achaians. So it's very interesting. Just as important as what the poet does say is what the poet doesn't say. What he omits, not knowingly, but it seems unknowingly. That is, there simply is no critical standpoint within this text. It is an incredibly alien text, unlike any text that you or I would read today. The poet also indicates in the lines that I read that actually it comes right after the lines that I read, and maybe I'll continue, because this is a moment where the poet indicates that Poseidon doesn't want the Achaean walls to stand because it takes the spotlight away from the wall that he and Apollo built in Troy. Because the wall of Troy was not built by mortal hands, it was built by Poseidon and Apollo. And we saw in book number 7 that Poseidon indicated that he was not happy that the Achaeans were building this wall. But let's look at what the poet says. So I'm going to pick up where I last left off. Therefore, it, the wall, was not to stand firm for a long time, so long as Hector was still alive, and Achilles was angry, so long as the citadel of Lord Priam was a city untaken. For this time the great wall of the Achaeans stood firm, but afterward, when all the bravest among the Trojans had died in the fighting, and many of the Argives had been beaten down, and some left, when in the 10th year the city of Priam was taken, and the Argives gone in their ships to the beloved land of their fathers, then at last Poseidon and Apollo took counsel to wreck the wall, letting loose the strength of rivers upon it. All the rivers that run to the sea from the mountains, and then a number of mountains are mentioned. So Poseidon had already planned to destroy the Achaean wall, but that would have happened after the Achaians had sailed home. We will see that in book number 12, in fact, the Achaian wall is breached in this book. Book number 12, the entire wall does not collapse, but the Achaian wall is breached. Okay. It turns out that the Achaian wall is built, we are told, of logs and stones. This is at line number 29, if you are following along in the Lattimore translation. I think this might be the first time, if I'm not mistaken, that the materials used to construct the wall is mentioned. Line number 14. Thus afterward, Poseidon and Apollo were minded to put things in place, but at this time, battle and clamor were blazing about the strong-founded wall, and the bastion timbers were thundering as they were struck, as the Argives, broken under Zeus's lashing, were crowded back on their hollow ships. What a interesting way the poet tells about, understands the plight of the Achaians at this point as a lashing from Zeus. Zeus is the punisher bringer, the one who is scourging the Achaians. And struggled to get clear in dread of Hektor, the strong one, who drove men to thoughts of panic. But Hektor, as he had before, fought on like a whirlwind. Often you will find, as we have seen, the heroes being compared with the gods, the power of the gods. And the power of the gods is expressed through forces of nature or as forces of nature, and sometimes as the power that is found in the animal kingdom. And we have talked about the significance of how the insect world, the animal world, the human world, and the divine world are in many ways represented in light of one another. Because the Achaians, the Greeks, understand their own lives in the likeness of nature. And so it is not a surprise, or at least it shouldn't come as a surprise when we understand that the power of human beings will be represented in terms of analogies of nature, in terms of analogies of the divine world, and the power of the divine world will be represented in terms of analogies of nature, whether it's the insect world or the animal world. And in many ways, each world is interchangeable with the other. And we will see the significance and have the opportunity to discuss this further when we work through the Aeneid, where it will become quite clear in book number 6 that the ultimate nature of all things is one. We'll see this also in Plato, but I'm thinking about a particular moment in the Aeneid in book number 6, where it becomes very clear that the nature of all things is one, and it helps to explain how and why the human being has to consult nature to understand his own life. The reason that you have seers in the ancient Greek and Roman worlds is precisely because the human beings could not distinguish themselves from nature in any essential respect. And as such, they would look to nature to understand their own lives precisely because the principle that determined or governed or caused nature to be the way it is the very same principle that determines human life. And so when the Achaians studied the birds or the liver lobes of the animals or the um, uh, height of the tides in the sea, or the movement of the sun, or the stars in the sky, or the wind, or the thunder and the lightning, the reason why these things were significant for the Greeks is because it told them whether or not the gods were angry and what what they were in for in their future. So it's very interesting that Hector here is compared to as a whirlwind. We know that the Achaians and the Trojans, or individuals within either army, have been compared to like blazing fire or things like that. The raging force of a river, or colliding streams. But Hector, as he had before, fought on like a whirlwind, as when among a pack of hounds and huntsmen assembled, a wild boar or lion turns at bay in the strength of his fury, and the men closing themselves in a wall about him stand up to face him and cast at him with the volleying spears thrown from their hands. And in spite of this, the proud heart feels not terror nor turns to run, and it is his own courage that kills them. And again he turns on them, trying to break the massed men, and wherever he charges, the masses of men break away in front of him. Such was Hector as he went through the battle and rallied his companions and drove them to cross over the ditch. Now let's stop there for a second. It's very interesting to me that in this particular passage that I read, where Hector is compared to a wild boar or a lion, the boar is praised. The boar is praised for being encircled by a number of men, maybe who are trying to hunt him, and he charges at them, and the men scatter. This is a sign of power. Hector is compared to this animal because the Achaians are scattering when his presence is felt, when his presence is near. And so, to understand Hector in terms of the power of the animal is to understand the power of the animal in terms of the power of a human being. So the point that I want to make clear here is that when the human being is animalized, you can say, the animal is humanized. That is, what we today would call projecting onto the animal human characteristics is how the Achaians understood themselves, or expresses how the Achaians understood themselves. It's really unbelievably striking when you look at a passage like this and then you think back to the opening chapters of Genesis, the first book in the Hebrew Bible, where it's made very clear on a number of different occasions, in a number of different ways, that the human being is not created in the likeness of nature, that the human being must not understand himself in the image of nature, and that the human being has dominion over nature or rules over nature. There's a distinction being made between nature and human beings, and it's an absolutely fundamental distinction that we need to make in order to understand both nature and the human being, and thirdly, the relationship between them. If we do not make the distinction between nature and human beings, then we do not have a proper understanding of nature, We do not have a proper understanding of human beings, and we do not have a proper understanding of the relationship between them and of a healthy relationship between them. Now, when Hector rallies his companions to the Achaean ditch, they have to cross the ditch in order to get to the Achaean wall. But the horses, at this point, at the edge or at the lip of the ditch, balk. They do not go down. And here we have a very interesting, relevant description about this ditch. And this is the first time that this has been mentioned in the Iliad. The horses balked at the edge of the lip and dared not cross, whinnying loud, since the ditch in its great width frightened them, being not easy for them to overleap, nor to walk through, since along the whole length the jut of the overhangs stood on both sides, and the surface of the floor was thickset with pointed palisades, which the sons of the Achaians had piled there, dense and huge, so as to hold off the rage of attackers. So now we get a picture of the ditch. So imagine that the hole, the space between these two hands, is the ditch. So what the Achaians did is they actually created like an overhang. So it's like the horses would actually have to drop into the ditch because there was a bend to get to the bottom, right? And then it would come like this. So there was an overhang on both sides, and the ditch actually curved back inwards. So it was not perpendicular even. And there was a straight drop. So you can see why the horses would balk here. And we're also told here that the floor of the ditch, the ground, was thickset with pointed palisades. These are the stakes. These are the spear-like things that were impaled into or paled into the ground. So the horses do not cross at this point. And a horse straining at the strong wheeled chariot might not easily enter there, but the dismounted were strong in their effort. So definitely the horses will not be able to go into the ditch with their chariots, but even dismounting from the horse, even then you have to drop. You can't simply walk into the ditch. Now, Polydamas is a Trojan seer. We know that Calchas is the main Trojan seer in the Achaean army. Polydamas seems to be the main Trojan seer in the in the Trojan army. And Polydamas advises Hector not to take the horses into the ditch because of the stakes inside of it and because it would be very, very hard to cross. And because the passage, he says, is very narrow. This happens at, well, between maybe lines 60 to 66. And so he says to Hector that if we actually do cross the ditch and the Achaians are able to rally, then we're stuck. We're going to be stuck in the space between the ditch and the wall, and many Trojans will die. So he says to Hector, if they turn again and a backrush comes on us out of the ships and we are driven against the deep ditch, now they would have to cross back across the ditch to get back to their camp. Then I think no longer could one man to carry a message yet clear to the city. Once the Achaians have turned back upon us, come then, do as I say, let us all be persuaded. Let us tell our henchmen to check our horses here by the ditch, then let ourselves, all of us dismounted and armed in our war gear, follow Hektor in mass formation. So what Polydamas is advising Hektor is that, first of all, nobody goes across inside on the horse, but everyone dismounts. And secondly, that they set up groups, they set up five different formations. We will see that the number would be five in order, and then cross together, led by Hektor. It's not clear whether they cross together side by side or whether they cross one behind the other, but they would all be led by Hektor. Hektor is satisfied with this counsel of Polydamas, and he orders the leaders to order their men to dismount. And they set up 5 different battalions. We are told that Hektor leads the first battalion. Cabrines leads the second battalion. I'm sorry, it's Paris that leads the second battalion. Helenus, who is Hector's brother, the seer, we encountered him in book number 6. He leads another battalion. Aeneas leads the 4th battalion. And Sarpedon, who is the son of Zeus and king of the Lycians, he leads the 5th battalions. 108. Then the rest of the Trojans and renowned companions in battle were willing to follow the order of blameless Polydamas. But there is one person that doesn't, and he's going to pay heavily for this. I'm going to jump at this point to maybe about line number 200. So up to this point, the Trojans that want to cross the ditch, that had set up the 5 different battalions led by 5 different leaders, and then of course there were lieutenants together with each leader, they are still paralyzed and not able to cross the ditch. And one of the things that has paralyzed them is an omen that has appeared. And it's an eagle omen. And this is what the Trojans saw as they were standing at the lip of the ditch, but before they had crossed the ditch. Start line number 200. As they were urgent to cross, a bird sign had appeared to them. An eagle flying high and holding to the left of the people, and carrying in its talons a gigantic snake, blood-colored, alive, still and breathing. It had not forgotten its warcraft yet, for writhing back it struck the eagle that held it by chest and neck, so that the eagle let it drop groundward in pain of the bite, and dashed it down in the midst of the battle, and itself, screaming high, winged away down the wind's blast. And the Trojans shivered with fear as they looked on the lithe snake lying in their midst, a portent of Zeus. What was this eagle omen? Well, the eagle omen was of an eagle that had in its talons a snake. As it was flying, we are told the snake was being carried to the left of the people, holding to the left of the people, 2201. Left and right are relative. You know, my left is your right as you are watching this video. So the whole left of the people doesn't mean anything because you need to know left of which people or facing in what direction. If I was to turn around, left and right would be reversed. But the snake was holding in its talons, the eagle was holding in its talons the snake, and the snake bit the eagle. And then the eagle was forced to drop it, and the eagle wheeled around and winged away down the wind's blast. Winged away, I'm not sure if it's wheeling around, but the eagle left it and flew away. Now, what happens next is very interesting. Polydamas the seer reads this omen as having the following meaning. He says at line number 216, let us not go on and fight the Danaans by the ship. I think that it will end as the portent was accomplished, if the bird sign that came to the Trojans as we were trying to cross was the true one. So clearly Polydamas understands the eagle as being the Trojans and the snake as being the Achaians. And when the snake bit the eagle, it's symbolized or it signified or it portended an effective retaliatory strike that the Trojans would suffer once they had crossed the ditch. So Polydamas warns Hektor, advises Hektor not to move forward. He says, so we, even though in our great strength, we break in the gates and the wall of the Achaians, and the Achaians give way before us, we shall not take the same ways back from the ships in good order, since we shall leave many Trojans behind us, whom the Achaians will cut down with the bronze, as they fight for themselves by their vessels. So an interpreter of the gods would answer, one who knew in his mind the truth of the portents, and whom the people believed in. Now, this leads one to ask, how is one to even understand a portent of nature, or whether or not something in nature is a portent at all? Did the eagle simply get bitten by a snake and that has no meaning? Or is it the case that the eagle represents the Trojans, the snake represents the Achaians, and the strike represents that if we push forward, the Achaians will retaliate? Or one could ask, does the eagle represent the Achaians? Does the snake represent the Trojans? And does the strike represent an effective Trojan attack? How do you interpret what an omen is? How do you, assuming that something is an omen and not simply eagles doing their thing, which is feeding on prey or hunting prey? So it sounds like, well, the text presents this as an omen, but the reality is that there's no way to know whether or not something is an omen at the time that one sees a happening in nature. And Hektor, he doesn't like what Polydamas has said. So at line number 230, looking darkly at him, tall Hektor of the shining helm answered, Polydamas, these things that you argue please me no longer. Your mind knows how to contrive a saying better than this one. But if in all seriousness this is your true argument, then it is the very gods who ruined the brain within you. You who are telling me to forget the counsels of thundering Zeus, in which he himself nodded his head to me in assent, and assented. But you tell me to put my trust in birds, who spread wide their wings. I care nothing for these. I think nothing of them, nor whether they go by on our right against dawn and sunrise, or go by to the left against the glooming mist and the darkness. No, let us put our trust in the counsel of great Zeus. It's striking. It's so remarkable. Hector is telling Polydamas, I don't believe in birds' signs. I believe in Zeus. And Zeus has guaranteed, or Zeus has given signs in book number 11 that the glory belongs to me. We know that Zeus had sent Iris to carry a message to Hector in book number 11. Until the sun goes down. That's not going to happen until book 18, line 241 in the Lattimore translation. But Polydamas understands the eagle omen as a sign of Zeus, as the word of Zeus. So Hector says, I don't believe in eagles, I believe in Zeus, but that's what Polydamas believes in when he understands the eagle to be a message from Zeus. So both Polydamas and Hector are understanding the cause of their fortune in Zeus. And yet here they are opposed because Polydamas understands the omen to be a communication from Zeus, and Hector understands the eagle and the snake interpretation to be contradicting the communication of Zeus. But both understand Zeus to be the cause of things. It's fascinating. And then Hector threatens Polydamas with death. So stunning to see how quickly a companion, a trusted seer can become hateful to the point where Hector wants him dead. Hector tells him at line number 248, but if you shrink away from the murderous work or turn back some other man from the fighting, beguiling him with your arguments, at once beaten down under my spear, you will lose your own life. He spoke and led the way, and the rest of them came on after him with unearthly clamor. And over them Zeus, who delights in the thunder, drove down from among the hills of Ida the blast of a windstorm, which swept the dust straight against the ships. Zeus, who delights in thunder. What does that mean? What is being communicated about a god that delights in thunder? Clearly, thunder and lightning express power. Zeus, who delights in power. But what does that mean? What's the compass for Zeus's decision-making? How is Zeus's power expressed? If I say about a person that he delights in power, it doesn't tell you whether or not that person is using his power to help or to hurt. But the poet doesn't ask, and Hector doesn't ask. Nobody asks anywhere in the Iliad. Is Zeus using his power for moral purposes? And the reason you don't find anyone asking is because there is no concept of morality as you and I understand morality. When you and I speak about morality, we're speaking ultimately about what benefits human beings. But Zeus's power is expressed in destroying human beings, and he's celebrated for that. Was mazing the minds. Zeus was mazing the minds of the Achaians and giving glory to the Trojans and Hector. And they, in the confidence of the portent shown, in their own strength, worked to break down the great wall of the Achaians. They tore at the projections on the outworks and broke down the battlements and shook with levers the jut of the buttresses, the projecting supports. The Achaians had stuck in the earth on the outer face to shore their defenses. They tore at these in hope of breaking down the Achaians' wall. But now the Danaans did not give way in front of them, but they, fencing the battlements with the hides of oxen, hurled from the wall at the enemy who came on beneath it. Now, the battlements are the alternating high and low parapets on the wall. This is the top pointed part of the wall. I wonder if I'm trying to think why would it be covered with hides of oxen? I can see how the wall would be covered with hides of oxen because it would prevent climbing the wall. Not sure what the hides of oxen, what the purpose that is, what purpose it has. Well, the two Aiases are trying to rally the Achaians, trying to stir up the warcraft, we are told. And I just want to read to you what they say. This is at line number 269 and 270. Dear friends, you who are preeminent among the Argives, you who are of middle estate, you who are of low account, since all of us are not alike in battle, this is work for all now, and you yourselves can see it. Now let no man let himself be turned back upon the ships for the sound of their blustering, but keep forever forward, calling out courage to each other. So may Olympian Zeus, who grips the thunderbolt, grant us a way to enter to the city when we beat off the attack of our enemies. Notice how Aias immediately categorizes the members of the army in terms of high account, middle account, and low account, whether this refers directly to warcraft or whether this refers to their own nature. But it's very clear that not everyone is equal. This points to the order of rank within the army in just a very basic way, where Aias separates these into three categories. The poet now speaks about how, snowflakes that are coming from thick clouds in incessantly on a winter day, how this represents the weapons that are being thrown, the missiles that are being thrown, the stones and the other missiles. Let's actually read that analogy. It's just so striking. Imagine looking outside on a windless winter day with heavy snowfall. And imagine each one of those snowflakes is a stone or a projectile. Such was the Aiantes' far cry, and they stirred the Achaians' war strength. And they, as storms of snow, descend to the ground incessant on a winter day, when Zeus of the councils, showing before men what shafts he possesses, brings on a snowstorm and stills the winds asleep in the solid drift, enshrouding the peaks that tower among the mountains and the shoulders outjutting, and the lowlands with their grasses and the prospering work of men's hands. And the drift falls along the gray sea, the harbors and benches, and the surf that breaks against it is stilled, and all things elsewhere it shrouds from above with the burden of Zeus's rain heavy upon it. So numerous and incessant were the stones volleyed from both sides, some thrown on Trojans, others flung against the Achaians by Trojans, so the whole length of the wall thundered beneath them. Well, Sarpedon is actually the first one to breach the wall. Sarpedon is the son of Zeus, and Sarpedon is driven by Zeus. He's described as being like a lion among horn-curbed cattle. Line number 293. How many times have we seen that analogy before, or simile before? He went onward. This is at line number 299. He went onward like some hill-capped lion who for a long time has gone lacking meat. And the proud heart is urgent upon him to get inside of a close steading. This is a farmstead that is united with buildings. A farmstead is a farm that is united with buildings. Sarpedon was like some hill-kept lion who for a long time has gone lacking meat, and the proud heart is urgent upon him to get inside of a close steading and go for the sheep flocks. And even though he finds herdsmen in that place who are watching about their sheep flocks, armed with spears and with dogs, even so he has no thought of being driven from the steading without some attack made, and either makes his spring and seizes a sheep, or else himself is hit in the first attack by a spear from a swift hand thrown. So now his spirit drove on godlike Sarpedon to make a rush at the wall and break apart the battlements. Now Menestheus tries to warn the Iantes and the Achaean archer Teucros about Sarpedon and Glaukos, Sarpedon's ally, compatriot. But Sarpedon will eventually make it to the wall and break the top part. That happens at line number 397 onwards. Sarpedon, grabbing in both ponderous hands the battlements, this is again the part at the top of the wall. It provides some cover for the soldiers. And it actually also is the part of the wall where there are openings by which you can, or through which you can throw things or shoot things like arrows. Sarpedon, grabbing in both ponderous hands the battlements, pulled, and the whole thing came away in his hands. And the rampart was stripped defenseless above. He had opened a pathway for many. Now, it's not Sarpedon who actually breaks through the wall. It's Hektor who does that. And this is how this particular book ends. I want to start reading at line 430. Everywhere the battlements and the bastions, these are the projecting parts of the fortifications. Everywhere the battlements and the bastions were awash with men's blood shed from both sides, Achaean and Trojan. But even so, the Trojans could not drive panic among the Achaians, but held evenly, as the scales which a careful widow holds, taking it by the balance beam, and weighs her wool evenly. At either end, working to win a pitiful wage for her children. So the battles fought by both sides were pulled fast, and even until that time when Zeus gave the greatest glory to Hektor, Priam's son, the greater glory to Hektor, Priam's son, who was first to break into the wall of the Achaians. Let's stop there for a second. Look at this analogy. So Achaians and the Trojans are both dying at this point at the Achaean wall. And nevertheless, while Hektor is extremely powerful in battle, the Achaians are not giving way. And the widow the analogy that is used here is, imagine a widow that is very poor and who has a balance beam and who is weighing tufts of wool on each side to make a pitiful wage for her children. What is this widow doing? Making sure that she doesn't give more than the person is paying for. So whether you have if you have a piece of wool that you're selling for a particular amount, you put it on one side and you're selling another piece of wool for that same amount, you want to make sure that that other piece of wool is not more than the first piece. And so you want to put it on the other side and make sure that the scale is completely balanced. This is how the balance in the battle between the Achaians and the Trojans is represented. This is how even things are. It's as even as a balance beam that a widower is using when she weighs wool to sell to earn a pitiful wage for her children. It's so interesting. Until that time when Zeus gave the greater glory to Hector, 437, Priam's son, who was first to break into the wall of the Achaeans. For he lifted his voice and called in a piercing cry to the Trojans, "Rise up, Trojans, breakers of horses." Breakers of horses means domesticator of horses. Hector is called the breaker of horses. To break a horse means to domesticate a wild horse. You still see this even today, where people take wild horses and they domesticate them. Some of them are incredible. They can do so within a few hours. Rise up, Trojans, breakers of horses, and wreck the ramparts of the Argives and let loose the inhuman fire on their vessels. So Hector spoke, driving them on. And they all gave ear to him and steered against the wall in a pack. And at once, gripping still their edged spears, caught and swarmed at the wall's projections. They're actually climbing up the wall. Meanwhile, Hector snatched up a stone that stood before the gates and carried it along. It was blunt-mast at the base, but the upper end was sharp. 2 men, the best in all a community, could not easily hoist it up from the ground to a wagon, of men such as men are now, but he alone lifted it and shook it, as the son of devious devising Kronos made it light for him. Look at how Hector's greatness is described here. He's able to lift up a stone that even 2 men, the best in the community, the best in all a community, could not easily hoist it up from the ground to a wagon, such as men are now. The best men in the community, even they, 2 of them, would not be able to easily lift up a stone that to Hector, with the power of Zeus given to him by Zeus, or the power that Zeus gave him, was lifting up so lightly. The best in the community is understood as those who have the natural strength. It doesn't say that he lifted up a stone that 2 men, the strongest in the community, could not easily carry. It says the best in the community could not easily carry, associating best with strongest and strongest with best. You can see again how unbelievably different the values are, even at the most basic level, with the values in the Bible. What matters is strength. What matters is power. What matters is natural strength to cause destruction. There's nothing whatsoever about the highest values being associated with any notion of what you and I would call moral life. It simply doesn't exist. That's why it's not here. So he lifts up the stone. As when a shepherd easily carries the fleece of a wether. This is a castrated ram, male sheep. As when a shepherd easily carries the fleece of a wether, picking it up with one hand, and little is the burden weighting him. So Hektor, lifting the stone, as though it was like fleece, carried it straight for the door leaves, which filled the gateway ponderously close-fitted together. These were high and twofold, and double door bars on the inside, overlapping each other, closed it. And a single pin bolt secured them. He came and stood very close, and taking a strong, wide stance, threw at the middle, leaning into the throw that the cast might not lack force, and smashed the hinges at either side. And the stone crashed ponderously in, and the gates groaned deep, and the door bars could not hold. But the leaves were smashed to a wreckage of splinters under the stone's impact. Then glorious Hektor burst in with a dark face like sudden night. But he shone, the ghastly glitter of bronze that girded his skin, and carried 2 spears in his hands. No one could have stood up against him and stopped him except the gods when he burst in the gates, and his eyes flashed fire. Whirling, he called across the battle to the Trojans to climb over the wall, and they obeyed his urgency. Immediately some swarmed over the wall, while others swept in through the wrought gateways, and the Danaans scattered in terror among the hollow ships, and clamor incessant rose up. Now the battle is right at the Achaian ships. The Achaians are in the most critical situation they have been in anywhere in the Iliad up to this point. Hektor and the Trojans, they want to burn the ships, destroy the Achaians once and for all. On to book number 13 next. My name is Mohammed Kimji. If you would like to reach out to me, please send me a message on LinkedIn. Thank you for your time.